Small and mid-sized businesses are responsible for half of our nation's workforce. And amid this pandemic, nearly a third of small businesses have stopped operating. That's according to a Facebook survey. And while Congress passed the Paycheck Protection Program in March, allocating $669 billion so far, those funds were meant to cover just 8 weeks of expenses. This is clearly going a lot longer. Our next guests have drafted a bipartisan bill to support small and mid-sized businesses for the rest of the year. Joining us now, Democratic Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado and Republican Senator Todd Young of Indiana.
Thank you guys so much for being with us. More importantly, thank you for working together across party lines to fight for small businesses. They are the backbone of this country economically, and the more great work you do, the better it is for them, the better it is for all of us. Let me start, though, with something that was said earlier this morning, Senator Bennet, and that came from Zeke Emanuel, who's been very conservative. He's a very conservative doctor when it comes to his guidelines for how we handle this pandemic. Zeke said, hey, Americans need to get out to the parks. They need to walk on beaches safely, obviously social distancing, and eating outside restaurants if the tables are separated and they have masks on. This should not cause a problem because there's not a lot of incidences of people catching this disease outside. Isn't that great news? And doesn't that send a message that if you're hearing that from Zeke Emanuel, who's very conservative when it comes to this, that we really should start moving forward and getting small businesses going again in a safe and responsible manner that follow the White House guidelines?
I completely agree with Dr. Emanuel. That's what Colorado is doing. We're being guided by the data. You know, if things spike again, we're going to have to close down again. I think the objective that all of us should have is to restart the economy and to keep it open. And that's why we need the testing in place. That's why we need the contact tracing in place. And that's why we've got to get the bill that Todd Young and I have introduced in place, because so many small businesses, especially our hardest hit businesses, our restaurants and others that have been confounded by these stay-at-home orders and are still being affected by these stay-at-home orders through no fault of their own. You know, most of them, or only 1 in 5, I think, have the cash to last for 3 months. Senator Young and I have a bipartisan proposal that I think will keep the vast majority of our small businesses in business through this pandemic and get us out on the other end.
Senator Young, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for your work for small businesses. I know Indiana's getting out there. They're getting back to work. Talk about this bill and how it's going to help keep small businesses open through this pandemic.
Oop.
All right, we're going to work on his audio. Senator Bennet, can you answer that question, and we'll get Todd when the sound comes back. Go ahead.
Sure. He could probably do a better job than I will do, but it does two things. Basically, it does two things. One, it takes the PPP program that you mentioned, which is an 8-week program, and it says we should extend that to 16 weeks, which we need to do. But second, it creates a loan for, it's not a grant, but a loan for small businesses to cover their working capital for the next 6 months of the year so they can stay open until the economy begins to reopen and recover. And then people have 7 years to pay back these loans. If we don't provide something like this, what we're going to see is millions of small businesses in this country close and never reopen again. And as Mika said, they are the backbone of our economy.
Senator Young, I think we have your audio now. Tell us about this bill and why it's so important that Republicans and Democrats come together to pass it for small businesses.
Yeah, sorry about those audio challenges. The bill is so simple, it speaks for itself. The Paycheck Protection Program, which was, broadly bipartisan, provided a short-term bridge to the other side of this pandemic. It was all of our hopes that we could contain the virus, we could get folks back to work as we open up the economy in fairly short order. What we've done in this legislation is extended that program for a number of weeks so that more people could benefit from it, and then come up with a program, as my colleague Senator Bennet said, for 6 months of payroll, for benefits, for fixed costs, for the hardest hit businesses. We want to make sure that only the businesses that absolutely require these forgivable loans have access to them, but they need access to them. Otherwise, we're going to have small businesses and medium businesses that aren't solvent for the longer term.
Sounds great. Willie.
Senator Young. Yes, Senator Young, it's Willie. Guys, good to have you on this morning. First of all, we know you're the senator from Indiana because you have a shelf full of basketballs over your right shoulder, so we've established that. But let's talk about how this money gets into the pockets of people in your state, for example. There were some problems early on with PPP in terms of people not being able to access that money quickly. How quickly, once you have this bill passed, assuming you do, does the money get into the hands of those small business owners who, as you point out, don't have much time to spare here?
Well, we intend to work through existing financial institutions, which is why, though there were some hiccups and friction points with the Paycheck Protection Program, compared to other government programs, the money got out there in a number of weeks. We think that we can pick up right where Paycheck Protection left off and get it out there in very short order. So that's one of the reasons we chose the approach we did in the Restart program, so that people can work through their financial institutions. We also want to make sure that those businesses, those employers that employ over 500 people, have access to these funds. We stood up a program, the Main Street program, for those employers, and it's still being developed. It hasn't been rolled out yet, and so this will be a simpler, more accessible program that we think will help those employees stay attached to the workforce during a down economy.
So, Senator Bennet, what's the prospect of this passing? Have you talked to Leader McConnell about it?
I think having to my knowledge, this is the only bipartisan bill that's been introduced on this subject. So I think actually the prospects are pretty good. I haven't talked to Senator McConnell about it. We got to, in my view, we need to do more. We got to support our state and local governments so that we don't compound the recession that we're in right now, but with massive layoffs of police and firefighters and teachers. This would be an important part of the next bill, and I think hopefully people are going to hear what I think Todd Young and I are going to hear over this recess, which is you guys haven't done enough. We need to do more. And when we come back, I hope we'll work in a bipartisan way to do it. One other aspect of this bill that neither of us has mentioned that I think is really important is that because we make the firms that are eligible or firms that have lost revenue, we ensure that firms that don't need the help don't get the help. Only the hardest hit businesses, which is, a lot of businesses in my state and Todd Young's state, will have access to it. I think that's another improvement over the prior program and ought to be a reason to get bipartisan support.
Boy, that is so important. I have so many former constituents who have restaurants, family restaurants, Senator Young, that didn't get it in that first round, that have small family businesses. Really quickly, we've got to close. We're coming up on a hard break. But talk about how important it is that this money gets into the right hands.
Well, look, I'm hearing from real business owners who spent their lives building up their business. I'm hearing from their employees. Bowman Construction in Muncie, Indiana, Stan's Food Service in South Bend. These are real people with real families to sustain. Our legislation, the Restart Act, can help keep these businesses alive until consumer demand picks up again.
All right. Thank you so much, Senator Young. Greatly appreciate you being here. Senator Bennet, as always, thank you as well. Good luck on this bill. We thank you all for working together. It's so important right now.